This is the Masters Alliance podcast Uncut. And today we're joined by Master George Bell, an amazing Taekwondo martial artist who competed extensively and studied Jiu-Jitsu with the Gracies and Eskrima with world-renowned Filipino martial artists. Add to that the fact that he was an amazing businessman and has developed his own educational style and is a musician. Let's get ready, sit down, and enjoy the show. Okay, welcome to the Masters Alliance podcast, and I am proud and honored to be joined by one of my good friends and someone I respect a lot and also have done a lot of work with. We'll talk a little bit about our history together, but he was an elite athlete in our sport. He has done a number of things in our sport, inside and outside of our sport, but more importantly, he's been an awesome business person as well as a martial artist, and that is difficult to do. He also had the time and passion to learn some other martial arts, of which he is also an expert, and sought out the best that he could find to help him that journey. So today, I'm honored to have Master George Bell. Welcome to the Masters Alliance podcast, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here and be with this podcast with you.
Thank you, sir. I want to talk to you a little bit about the different things you've done, but I want to start with Taekwondo because that is our passion. It's what we've all done. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how were you introduced to Taekwondo and what led you to pursue it to such a high level?
Well, great question. So Taekwondo for me started with my family. So I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and my uncle happened to be my next door neighbor. Was a second degree black belt back then in '74. And so my mom put me into it for self-defense. My brother, my older brother, and myself, pretty much everyone in the family are black belts. And it started off as just a form of self-defense, just to be able to protect myself. And over the years, I was originally in the point circuit and used to do that kind of stuff back in the late 70s, going into the early 80s. And then when I moved to North Carolina in '87 for college, that's when I was introduced to Olympic Taekwondo. And that's where I started my journey with Olympic Taekwondo. And then I started doing different things while I was there for college. So I really pursued it pretty heavily while being a music major in college. So the demands are kind of very similar, to be honest. And then during that time, I started seeing some success. And then it was probably the early 90s when I started seeing that quite a bit of success where I can move forward with it and make a decision. Do I want to pursue this wholeheartedly, or do I just want to just keep it a hobby?
I realized, and I remember now that you were in North Carolina. Who were some of your influences there or your instructors that helped you in your Olympic Taekwondo journey?
I have like two major influences as far as instructors are concerned. The first one was Grandmaster Jun Lee in Raleigh. So he was actually more on the business side. So I started training with him on the martial art and really learned tremendous amounts of education from him when it came to business. Him, his brothers, we were all kind of training together at that time. And by this time, I think around '87, '88, I was a third degree black belt. And then what happened is later on around 90, I can't remember, sometime during that time frame, Dr. Yang Jianbang moved to North Carolina. And he pretty much brought the whole state together as far as the sport was concerned. You know, back in early 90s, everything was very this gym, this dojang or that dojang kind of thing. Everyone didn't want to cross train. But he kind of brought a whole bunch of different dojangs together, and we all started training together as a team as far as North Carolina. And within a short period of time, he just gave us a foundation. He gave us a system, of how to understand things from an intellectual standpoint, but also how to put it together with a training methodology. And people like Barry Partridge, myself, Josh Coleman, Kenny Hance, and so many others that came out of that state back in that era, everything just started coming together and our team started doing very, very, very well. It wasn't till he moved to China, I think it was a Kukiwan or WT that asked him to move to China to start their program, that we decided to either start training on our own or do whatever. So Barry Partridge led the North Carolina program after he left, and I went to the OTC at that point in time in '95.
Well, I remember that, and I knew that you were a good competitor because you trained with a number of great athletes as well as great programs, and there's no doubt that those individuals had an impact upon you and what you did. Can you tell us a little bit about what you thought your highest moments were in the sport of Taekwondo competing?
There will be a few of them. To be honest, for me, I wasn't necessarily the most consistent player, like across the board, like 5, 6, 7 years in a row at a certain level. I was always at like the top 3 level for all those years. But for as peaking, I think my best peaks were between around the 94, 95 range, and then again 98, 99. So it's kind of odd how it happened for me. I think I went through some ups and downs during the times. I had to get my head straight to kind of put things all together and make things work for me. And once I figured that out, I was able to make things happen. So back in 93, I won the Olympic Festival back when we had a U.S. Olympic Festival. And that was a very cool experience for me. And then soon after that, in 94, I was able to represent the United States as an alternate on the United States team. And I was able to fight at the IOC Cup in Korea. And this is where I was able to experience quite a few things. It was a very good experience for me. And I performed well, did well, and bronze medaled over there. And I came back on a high, so I felt like indestructible at that point in time. And then so I was doing really, really well during that period of time. And then again, after going through a little downslope and trying to get things back together around 98, actually 97, 98, but I think I was peaking more toward the 98, 99 range. I started doing extremely well there. And then that's when I was again medaling at quite a few different things, some of the international opens and things of that nature. And then, so I was feeling really, really good, doing well at nationals, doing well at multiple events. And I thought I was peaking for me. But at the same point, I was a bit on the older side as an athlete. So by the time I really got into the sport, I was already 20 something. So I would consider that old. So even when I was at started at OTC, I was already 26. So a lot of the athletes were probably like close to a decade younger than me, anywhere from 8 to 12 years younger than me. So I was kind of fighting father time. I know the earlier generation, your generation, you guys were older and still performing. It was different. I think over the years, it kept changing and changing, getting younger and younger and younger.
And I think that's true. I mean, you bring up some interesting points. Certainly there was the age changed as the athletes got better earlier. And so it was a difficult time because you find yourself a little bit on the older side competing against younger athletes. But with you talked a little bit about the challenges, and I want to kind of focus on that for half a second before we move on to the next topic. But what was a challenge in the sport that you experienced, and then how did it shape you for the future things that you are now doing?
I think for me, challenges were it was twofold. There was dealing with injuries and how to recover. That was a huge education for me because the generation I came up, there wasn't a lot of education as far as how to properly train, how to properly heal your body, how to take care of yourself. It wasn't until I moved to the Olympic Training Center in 95 that I learned anything about that. Prior to that, it was just go out there and fight hard, train hard, and just suck it up. That was the philosophy. And so injuries for one, and so I had a lot of knee surgeries. I just had 2 knee replacements last year. And the other one was a psychological aspect. Probably somewhere around 96, when I went to the OTC, going to a different program from Dr. Young's program to the OTC program, it was a little bit different. And it took me a little while to adapt. And what I had to figure out was it wasn't about the program per se. I had to figure out me. And I had to figure out how to make myself work within that program, but not lose my identity. And at first I was trying to conform too much to an identity. So once I figured that out, I was able to perform well again. It was just about have fun. And actually it was a particular event I remember to this day. It was a collegiate team trials. Yes, I was very old at that collegiate team trials. That's a subject for another day. But and I think this was 96. And my coach at the time was coaching one of the other athletes. So I had Michelle Thompson. She was a world silver medalist, some time back from North Carolina. So she coached me and she said, George, just be the old you. Just do what you know. And it kind of just like motivated me just to, hey, just do what I do best. Do what I do that got me there in the first place. And I performed well. And, we had a round robin format, just like regular team trials. And I beat a lot of good guys. And I ended up in a three-way tie for first. We had to do another fight off and so forth. But I felt good about that performance. And that performance was kind of like an upslope for me. But psychologically, prior to that, I was always trying to do something that really wasn't me. And it kind of set me backwards a little bit for a short period of time, maybe about like 1 year or a little less than a year.
Well, I noticed that you also have studied a number of other martial arts. I'm going to touch on each, but I want to talk a little bit about your jiu-jitsu journey and what made you want to start to study it and start, basically over again in another martial art. What was the thing that inspired you, and how has your transition gone in that? Not to say you left Taekwondo, but you certainly have become quite adept at jiu-jitsu as well.
Two things. First, my introduction to jiu-jitsu was in 1994, I believe, while I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's where my first dojo was. I opened it up in 1993. And UFC 3 was being held in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think you might have been commentating there. I'm not sure. I can't remember. No, you did number 1, I think, or number 2. 2? Okay. So number 3 was in Charlotte, and they came to my gym and they asked me, hey, can you help promote this? And we'll give you 10 free tickets. So they gave me 10 free tickets. And then they said, hey, well, Rickson Gracie is in town and he would like to try to do some privates with some people. So I couldn't afford the private, but I did myself and 3 of my instructors. And we did a group of 4 of us for 1 hour with Rickson. So it was my first introduction to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then moved forward some years. I didn't touch it again until maybe a little bit while I was at the OTC, go figure. Master Jay Warwick at the time was already a blue belt, and he was the executive director or CEO. I can't remember what the term was back then for USTU. And so every once in a blue moon, we would talk about Filipino martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then we would go down on the mats and we would roll a little bit, and he would slaughter me in seconds. And I was like, oh God, I got to learn more of this. So then Ed Liddy, which was the coach at the Olympic Training Center for USA Judo, myself and the Taekwondo coach, Grandmaster Hanwon Lee, we would connect with him and learn their mat work, which is their equivalent to Jiu-Jitsu per se. Little bit different, but it was kind of the introduction. So during the 90s, I had all these small little introductions. So when I finally retired from competitive Taekwondo after 2000, I moved to Arizona. And I was like, you know what? It's time for me to pursue this journey. So I didn't quite know who to connect with, and I got connected with Carlson Gracie Jr., which is out of Chicago. And I used to do seminars with him, but the seminar thing wasn't working. I would learn a lot, then forget. Learn a lot, then forget. Travel over there, learn a lot, then forget. So I asked him, who would you recommend? So I ended up training with a gentleman here. So I started 19 years ago, officially. I don't count anything prior to that, although I dibbled and dabbled. And so 19 years ago, I started formally here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've been doing it ever since. Fell in love with it. At first, I was only looking for the self-defense elements of it. I just wanted to learn the self-defense ground aspect of it. And end up falling in love with the sport and doing it for this whole entire time. I haven't stopped. It's actually my primary martial art to stay in shape. I still teach all my martial arts, but when I want to stay in shape, make sure I'm not gaining too much weight or anything like that, I use my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for that. So it's been a long journey, but it started back in the 90s and then it transitioned into the 2000s when I moved out.
And that brings me to my next question, which is, not only did you take that as a passion and certainly are continuing to see it through, but you also mentioned the Filipino martial arts, Eskrima, And so, what drew you to Eskrima and to train with a world class guru in that as well? And then, if I were going to ask another question, how did it complement your other martial arts, jiu-jitsu and taekwondo training?
Great question. Uh, Filipino martial arts, I was introduced in Charlotte, North Carolina. So North Carolina has a lot of foundational things for me, other than going back to Philly. And basically, there was a gentleman that he probably was living in Charlotte for maybe 2 years at the time, 1 or 2 years. He moved from the Philippines, named Bobby Tabuada, and he's pretty famous. He's probably the largest proponent for spreading the martial art of Balintawak Eskrima, and that's what I teach. It's a close quarter system of Filipino martial arts, a single stick art. And I was introduced to it then, and I trained with him privately for a few years before I moved to the OTC, the Olympic Training Center. And then after that, I would try to find people here and there. There was a couple other Filipino martial artists that were involved with Olympic Taekwondo at the time, Roland Farrar and a few other gentlemen that did Filipino martial arts. Even Grandmaster Jay Warwick, he also did some Filipino martial arts. And so we would share a little bit, but I didn't really get to practice as much, but I did as much as I could. And then, of course, as soon as I moved away, I just went full-fledged again. And I've been doing it ever since. Now, since then, like Manong Sambuit, he passed away, but he was considered probably the historian and a great source of knowledge within the Balintawak world. He happened to live out here. So I was training under him as well. And then my present grandmaster is out of Tacoma, Washington, but a Filipino gentleman that moved over there. So I try to always find that very reputable people, and I'm very picky about like anyone, even if it's coaching Taekwondo or someone I'm searching for Taekwondo, Filipino martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I just don't seek out someone just because they're wearing a black belt or they're supposed to be a guru or instructor. I try to seek out people based upon reputation, what they've done, what their accomplishments are, and what they produce, kind of thing. So I kind of look for a couple different factors, and then that's how I kind of pick and choose people. The Filipino martial arts, though, that hand-eye coordination is like, I consider it second best to boxing. You know, it's something that's tremendous, that really helps a lot. It really helps a lot with self-defense, and you can utilize it for so many other tools. You can even use it in Taekwondo, in some aspects of Taekwondo. So when it comes to touching, feeling, moving around and things like that, it's really, really a great system. You're not scared to be close to somebody, you know, at least from the Balintawak Eskrima world, because we do everything from that one arm's reach anyway. And and now it's been literally 30 years. I started in 94, and it's been 30 years now since I've been doing Balintawak. And something I really, really enjoy. That's probably what I enjoy teaching. My passions are like self-defense and Balintawak and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for teaching the most. Doesn't mean I don't have a passion for Taekwondo. That's my first love. You know, that's always my first love. I do that one day in and day out to this day. But I found that Taekwondo is a little bit different in how I take my approach with it, because of maybe some of the limitations that Taekwondo has, in my opinion.
And I think that's a great segue into my next question, which is, since you've done three very disparate and different martial arts, and I would say a very complete approach, because one obviously involves weapons and understanding close distance weapons. The other understands the ground game and how to protect yourself if you fall. And then, of course, Taekwondo, you know, which in my opinion is one of the best kicking and striking martial arts, with the exception of hands. Can you share with us any idea of that cross-pollination? I mean, how did it enhance your teaching approach, either in all styles or in just combined as a teacher and an instructor in your organization?
It has helped tremendously. So first of all, each martial art has a different culture. So from the Korean culture to the Filipino culture to the Brazilian culture, right? So each culture is distinctively different. And then the martial art culture of those martial arts are distinctively different. And this is not even going on the physical side, right? That being said, each one complements another in different ways. If it's from a teaching methodology or if it might be from just the blending of those arts. So to make something that's comprehensive. So let me give you an example. Taekwondo, I think, is the best martial art in the world for teaching uh, structure, discipline, focus, character development skills while teaching a solid martial art if you're teaching solid Taekwondo. Okay. So I believe Taekwondo is number one far as that's concerned. Some of the other martial arts don't do that remotely as well as Taekwondo does. Okay. They're great martial arts. Don't get me wrong, but they don't do that as well as Taekwondo does. So they have a lot to learn. So I have something I already use. I take those aspects of Taekwondo and I incorporate it with my jujitsu. I incorporate it. So usually jujitsu is very informal. The Brazilians are kind of like laid back people. So they're a little bit more on the informal side. No, it's still yes, sir, no, sir. It's still bowing on the floor when you come in and come off the floor. So I still have those aspects that I have from Taekwondo I utilize because those skills of teaching respect, discipline, focus, as being an educator, I can't teach unless I can, especially when it comes to children, unless I can get them to focus. I have to be able to get them to focus. Otherwise it's going to be difficult. And I've been teaching now, I don't know, a lot of years, over 30 years. And there's a distinct difference with the kids now compared to the kids before, long time ago. And I find it more challenging now, far as getting their focus and getting that, it's not more difficult for me to implement structure, but it's more difficult to get them focused and locked in. So these are things that I try to do, but each martial arts has helped a lot. So some of the things, like for instance, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, this is something I really enjoy about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, at least from the lineage that I come from. I learned something about there's no right and wrong. Yes, we know there's right and wrong, but I like to say there's more efficient, more effective, less effective. Okay. So sometimes you can have something, and I use the example all the time when I teach self-defense. Someone can be off the streets, not formally trained, throw the craziest looking punch, hit you, knock you out. Right. So that was highly effective. Okay. Not the most efficient technique, but hey, it worked. It hit. Right. So, but the difference between that person, maybe a skilled person can break things down a lot more, will be a lot, and they'll have more efficiency with what they do. Okay. So a lot of times when people are doing different techniques and someone does, let's say, a sloppy front kick and you're trying to teach them a front kick, but it's, let's say, in an application sense, I'll say, well, that's not going to be quite as effective, but you know what? If you do it that way, it still might work. But you might get hurt. This person might be able to counter you easier or this or that, right? So I try to take some of that principle or that concept that I learned from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I apply that into my Taekwondo as well. So it kind of went the other way. And one of the things that I really, really love about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world is their integrity for their martial art. Although it's gotten diluted over the years a little bit, but not to a large extent, not compared to Taekwondo per se. And not to be negative about Taekwondo, but to be real, I like to keep everything real. Taekwondo has changed over the years, and the education is great. So I think that we should change our education to improve and help the people that we're working with. But at the same time, if we lose the integrity of what we do, then we're not a martial art anymore. All we are is just we're babysitters and we're just letting kids throw some kicks and punches that probably are not the best, right? So I like to keep things real as much as possible. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be a world-class athlete. It's not about that. Okay. If you're able to produce that, that's great. But it's about changing lives and doing other things. So that's how I see things.
That's a great point. I want to move on to something else that requires a lot of discipline that you also do, and we share a passion for this same subject. So you're an amazing musician, obviously went to school for music and a bass player, and I dabble, on the bass, but I'm really a guitar player. What about, why did you begin playing bass, and What inspired you to play the bass? And what's your preferred musical style?
I was introduced to music in fifth grade. So in fifth grade, I kind of excelled at it for some reason. So I was introduced, and these people came at an assembly at my elementary school, and they just played different pieces, and the bass player just did Jaws. And I was like, "Ooh, I like the sound of that. That was so cool." And Jaws was probably at that point in time. I think Jaws was just out just a few years before. I was like, "I want to play that." So I went to the class. I played that, and then I excelled in the choir class also, and I wrote my first piece of music. Then the kids actually performed it for a concert, and this was all while I was in fifth grade. I was like, "Wow, I'm actually doing quite a bit at that point in time," and I excelled at it. So I started with the double bass and then went into the electric bass. And then over the years, I think it's because of the influence of my mother, probably, I don't know, but jazz became a huge influence for me. So of course I like R&B and so many other genres of music. Actually, I can listen to any genre, but jazz is my first love, going back to straight jazz, from, bebop, hard bop, any derivative of. I really, really enjoy. It went into its electronic phase going in from the late 70s into the 80s. And then I'm not the biggest fan of smooth jazz, but it has its place, and I understand why it has its place, and so forth. So there's so many different aspects of jazz. Even jazz has subsections, and I really enjoyed it because although I'm classically trained and I enjoy classical music immensely, jazz gives you freedom. It reminds me of Taekwondo. Like when you first start learning Taekwondo reminds me of classical music, very structured, disciplined, right? Where now all of a sudden you get good at it. And now, especially when you're going into the sparring, even old school Pumse were free, where you still stuck with the parameters of what the Pumse was, but you still had that freedom of interpretation. Okay. Now it's like, who's the best robot per se? That's my interpretation. But jazz gives you that freedom. So when you're sparring, how you can be creative. Yes, I learned this. So from closed stands, you could do this or you could do that. From open stance, you could do this, you could do that. But now you have to use this. You have to use your brain. You have to figure things out. So whenever I would go against, and I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to show analogy of how jazz and the sparring work together. But when I would spar sometimes and I got someone that was like highly technical, okay, and let's say their technique or their aspect of playing that game was better than mine. Well, I don't want to play that game because they're going to whoop my butt, So I want to do something a little bit unorthodox so I can score on them. So it's about showing that creative side and figuring things out. So music actually helped me along the ways of being that creative person and feeling and be able to feel and understand things better. So, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about music. Also, I use the analogy when I teach Pumse, at least the way I used to teach Pumse. I used to teach Pumse was like a musical composition. So I say, does music is it monotone and does it go like this? Or does it have peaks and valleys? Does it go up and down? Do you have crescendos, decrescendos? Do you have all these different aspects of music? It makes you feel that music more. You resonate with that music more. Well, to me, that's what a Pumse should be, right? A Pumse should be a piece of art that you can resonate with, that you can feel. Okay. It's not necessarily that anymore, but that's how I used to teach it. I used to always use that analogy all the time. There's rhythm, there's feel, to all those things with a Pumse. At least there used to be. So those are the things that I like to kind of use those comparisons. Even with my students, I actually will use those comparisons at time as long as they understand concepts about music.
And I think that's a great segue into my next point, and it's a question. So I know that my journey in music started 4 or 5 years before I started Taekwondo, and I have thoughts on the effect on it and what it did for me. Do you feel that your music training influenced your Taekwondo training, or do you feel that your Taekwondo training enhanced your music?
That's a great question. So if you ask my professors from college, they'll say Taekwondo influenced music. At least that's what they told me 24/7. um, but I think they both influence each other to certain degrees because some concepts I didn't really learn. So I was raised up in old school Taekwondo Mudokwan. So I came up in a which is very karate based, right? So I came up in that style of Taekwondo before 87. And it wasn't until I was exposed to Olympic style Taekwondo that I really, I had that light bulb that went off and said, oh, wow, I got to do this. This is so awesome. Okay. Um, and that's where a lot of the aspects of what I was doing in music also kind of resonated and kind of blended with what I was doing. So, uh, it wasn't like I was being exposed to like nowadays these athletes and these kids, they're exposed to so many high level former athletes at such a young age that as long as they're open to learn, they're learning from a young age, and they're excelling so much faster. Um, where I wasn't really exposed to a lot of that concept of what you would think that we would use the how music would really impact my taekwondo per se until the late 80s. It wasn't until the late 80s going into the 90s. So for me, I maybe music was probably a little bit more of an influence, but maybe evenly it went back and forth because taekwondo is very structured. Taekwondo gave me tons of structure, and I know music is structured too, but Taekwondo is just very disciplined, and it helped me with the discipline side, and music helped me with that freedom side. So they both help equally, although my professors would say in a split second that Taekwondo was the one that influenced more. So I remember that because they said they even told me that one.
Oh, that's a good point. I'm going to move into we've been talking a lot about martial art and now about music, but I think one of the things that I remember early about you, and I actually contacted you because you were doing some martial art business, and it was based in part upon your experience as a martial artist. I remember I purchased a shield from you that you had designed that I thought was super awesome, and then I saw this uniform you had done. And it was so creative. So I want to talk a little bit about that idea and what motivated you to get into that business. I mean, that business is full of people that do it, but you decided to reach out and give that a shot. What was it about? What was it that caused you to think to do that?
Well, I started this company called Enzo Kimono, and probably 2011 ish, somewhere around then. And so being involved with jujitsu at the time, jujitsu has gone through an evolution. So they started, when they first started wearing uniforms, they were very judo-ish uniforms. And then, so they were actually were judo uniforms and with just slightly different cut. And then they started adapting and changing them. And then all of a sudden one company came out and started adding color to the uniforms, and they were creative. And then another company was had a awesome model, and it's like, wow, this model is working. And I said, well, let me try something out. I took a similar model, almost the same model, but I took a different spin on it. So what we did was we incorporated art with function. Okay. I would commission artists to do the artwork on inside of a gi, which is a uniform. And sometimes that would be made out of a material like the same type of material a rash guard would be. And then, or sometimes it would go right directly on the material. And we would make themes. So we would use a lot of the themes from, the kung fu movies of the 80s and stuff like that. And it was super popular. And then I connected with Wu-Tang, and I was able to do that. One was extremely popular in the jiu-jitsu world. I sold gis all over the world. And I was actually licensed to be able to use their branding and so forth. And so I did that, and it worked out perfectly. So I was doing a lot of creative stuff. I was being recognized and noticed in the community. And the model that we use, and it worked out really, really well. And I didn't invent it. Someone else definitely invented it, but we did batches. So basically I would fundamentally design a gi. Okay. And then we would put the artwork out there, and we use social media to get the name out there, to get it out there. Then all of a sudden get it all hyped up. Then we'll get some samples made. And then we'll take pictures. Photography is something that's super important. Take some pictures of that gi, and now people can actually see it. And all of a sudden people would pre-order it. So now I have 100 pre-orders, 150 pre-orders. And then now, so a month and a half later, they all come in, and then we ship them all out. And we do this every 3 to 4 months. And then eventually, after a couple years, I would design a few different styles of gis to keep in stock of lower level. But all those kind of gis were maybe a higher level, really well made, great art, commission art. And we actually sometimes even do prints that will come with the gi sometimes, and things like that. So the idea was a great idea, and it worked real well. Now the evolution has passed that, and now they're doing different stuff. So I couldn't go back to that model and exclusively. You have to kind of stay up with the times when it comes to that. So they've gone through some changes in the jiu-jitsu world when it comes to certain things. But that being said, at that point in time, it was a great format. It taught me a lot because I had to learn a lot about supply chain management. I had to learn a lot about dealing with Pakistan and China, because all the manufacturing, probably for gis, 90% of manufacturing at the time was in Pakistan, not China. China was more so like on the Taekwondo side. And maybe China was just getting into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world. So I did maybe 10 to 15% out of China, and the rest of it was primarily out of Pakistan. So, and you learn a lot about that. And to this day, that's kind of made a huge influence on me.
And that's going to be, I want to bring one more question into that. So you spoke a little bit about it, but, as a world-class martial artist, certainly a musician, and now a businessman, what are the key life lessons you learned from those pursuits that you would share with others?
First of all, if someone has an idea or a passion, they need to pursue it and go wholeheartedly. Commitment to any task, any goal, any mission that they have. I kind of use the same concept as an athlete. As an athlete, we always had goals, and you had your short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. Your long-term goal might be, let's say the Olympics. Doesn't mean you're going to get there, but it just means that you're going to do your best to pursue that path, right? And let's say you have some good knowledge, education, coaching, whatever it is. From the business world, just go out there, get the knowledge that you need to, find a good mentor. I always believe in having, at least 5 good mentors, and not necessarily if it's Taekwondo, they're not all going to be Taekwondo people. Maybe 1 or 2 of them might be Taekwondo people. The other ones might be mentors from other business aspects in life. And these are people, you need motivational people that are going to help you along the ways. And when I say help you, it could just be something that they say. It could be you picking up the phone, talking to them, and then I just get off the phone so freaking motivated that I'm ready to drive, and it just really get this job done, just because their words were such great words of encouragement, right? So having those positive people around you, those mentors, and having a mission and just going to pursue that mission. And, goals are just goals if you don't do anything. You actually have to act on them. And if you actually act on them and you actually make a path of pursuing those goals, you can get so much more done. And regardless if you fail or you succeed, you're going to learn. So, we always say in jiu-jitsu, either you win or you learn. So we don't say you lose. We say you win or you learn. And it's so failure is just a learning process. Okay. Hopefully that if you take that into consideration, that you're learning enough that you don't have as much of that process. And then you're now able to have some success from your path of trying to pursue that particular goal, whatever that may be. in the business world. It could be running a dojang or it could be something else. Whatever it is, get educated, have some mentors, and then get on a mission to pursue it wholeheartedly.
I mean, that's a great point. We're working on some educational program now for the WTMU and some other things. And I've been fortunate enough to work with the Kuki one and see, 300 or 400 athletes who want to up their skills and become certified international masters. And I think the one commonality they have that you have is they have a passion for learning. And the thing that you said that's going to resonate with me, certainly after this, which I have always wholeheartedly believed, learning through failure is an important part of success. Failure reveals the weaknesses in your armor that you wouldn't see had you not tried or competed. And towards that end, I see that you're wearing a USA Masters shirt, and I see your post on Facebook. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the USA Masters, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I sit on the board for the U.S. Masters team. It was founded by Miss Trinity Osborne, from Washington State. And she had a great idea. I was visiting her some years ago, 5-6 years ago, and her and her family. And she was like, George, there's this thing that's happening called the European Cup or European something that they were having over in Italy. And I was like, she says, you should go and compete. I said, Trinity, my knees are jacked up. I can't go, right? I can't do it. I said, well, maybe I could coach or I can be a manager or something, right? And but she had this passion. She had this idea. It was a great idea, And now what she's done is taken a passion of people just kind of like some of them. There's a lot of people that are former national ranked athletes. But then there's a lot of people that never did anything far as that's concerned in, let's say, in the 80s or 90s that have that passion and their body still functions that they want to go out there and have some fun, So it's really about just enjoying life, having that passion while you can. To me, I believe everyone has a window. So that's my personal opinion. We all have a window. My window was before. It's not now. Far as that's concerned, I train every single day, but it's not now. Far as the sport is concerned. But she's tapped into really helping people with the USA Masters team. And I just support her wholeheartedly with everything that she does with it. She's doing stuff in New York. She's doing stuff in Houston a lot. And then they travel regularly to different countries. So, and myself, my involvement is mainly just as board of director. And then if I can occasionally go to some events to help support the U.S. Masters team in any capacity, I will. And to be honest with you, although they do a lot of modern day training, they do all the modern stuff. But if you ever watch the guys fight, I'll say 70 to 90% of their fighting style is old school, So it's not like they're doing the new school stuff, but they train it. They're open-minded to be able to train everything. And I think it's a great avenue for people that may be between 35 to whatever that want to do something and see that window that they have. They might have 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, I don't know, where they can go pursue something and achieve something and feel a great accomplishment within themselves. And that's what I believe part of what Taekwondo is about. It's helping people. It's about helping and changing lives, making people feel another way. Fundamentally, when it comes down to it, someone asked me, what is training martial arts about? I don't care what martial art is about. I always say it's about acquiring relationships. Okay. And people look at me like I'm crazy. And I say, well, no, all of them is about acquiring relationships. I don't care if I'm kicking, swinging a stick, or if I'm grappling on the floor. Okay. You acquire relationships, around the world. We did it in Taekwondo. You more so than me. You've been all over the world. Okay. And you probably have friends in every single country, or at least associates in every single country. And I've been fortunate to travel quite a few places. I know a lot of people, a lot of different places. And these relationships are lasting relationships. You don't have to see the person day in and day out, but you have relationships with people. And martial arts is a common bond. I don't care what martial art it is. It's a common bond. And we just use martial arts as our tool. It's our medium. It's our, whatever it might be, grappling, kicking, punching, whatever. That's our median to get across from one person to another to have that connection. And then we're acquiring relationships. Some relationships, you might not connect with some people, but guess what? You're going to have more positive relationships than negative relationships over time, I believe.
And I think that's a great point. It certainly has been the case for me. And, our friendship came through martial arts, and a lot of my friendships come through martial arts when I see a like-minded individual. I want to ask you about two more things, and one is pro Taekwondo. So I know there's if people have the internet, I know there are places where people may not have the internet. Somebody joked once, but I was able to watch that. Can you tell us a little bit about your pro Taekwondo experience and what you thought of it as a format back then?
Oh, great question. First of all, Doug Fuchel, the founder of Pro Taekwondo, he did a phenomenal job of getting it out there. I have to give him huge kudos. He really, really, really pushed, and he had some great connections to get it out there on ESPN. But the format with ESPN was a lot different back then. So first it started with pay-per-view, and that was a huge success. That one was in San Jose in '97, I believe. And I loved it to death. It was like shorter rounds, slightly shorter rounds. So let's say minute and a half, 2-minute rounds. I think it was 2-minute rounds in the beginning, but multiple rounds. So you might do 5 rounds, or some people did 7 rounds, depending. And only gear you had was maybe a cup underneath and forearm and shins. So you're not wearing a headgear, you're not wearing a hogu, a chest protector, or anything of that nature. And you're just going at it. You're just having fun, and you're fighting. And well, my definition of having fun, which means fighting. And it was such a great platform. And the first one that started off in pay-per-view did well enough that he had some good people to help promote it. And then he got in on ESPN2 after that. And those were all pre-recorded, and then they were shown later, because that way they can have certain days, because I think there was pro sumo, pro judo, and pro taekwondo that was out all at the same time. And they usually came on the same, like, back-to-back kind of thing on TV back then. And my experience with it, it was absolutely fun. Everyone I ever fought were always friends of mine, from Dong Lee to Jimmy Gracier to Kevin McCullough, which I probably fought Kevin probably 6 or 7 times, I'm not sure. And all these different experiences doing that was just absolutely fun. And then never expected this to come out of it, but later on, YouTube. And now everything is on YouTube. And although our fights from earlier era are not really on YouTube, because everything was recorded differently, unless it was on TV at some point or another. So that's what helped it, because since it was on pay-per-view or ESPN, and it was actually recorded, now it was able to go on YouTube. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people were getting to see it, Hyun Lee and JoJo and all these different guys. And I became super popular off of Pro TKD, and more people knew me off of Pro TKD than my actual sparring career. So go figure. And I embraced it, and it was actually very, very cool. And so, but at the same time, the experience was extremely fun. I know, Taekwondo should have gone more that direction. When I say more that direction, Pro TKD had the point system, a multiple point system similar to today. Not quite the same, but different, right? So it wasn't 1 point for everything, but it was more dynamic. We were more engaged. It wasn't necessarily all the front leg game, but that has to do with rule changes / electronic gear. But we had more of a kickboxing rule set, where if you don't throw a minimum of this, then you get docked money. So in other words, you're losing money. So money is always a motivation. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not trying to lose my money. I have to get this many minimum kicks in. Oh, no, it's no problem. Okay. So everyone was out there fighting, and we learned a lot from the pay-per-view one. So the pay-per-view one taught us, that was the very first one. That taught us, like, you know what? We need to train differently. It was a little bit training we had to train differently compared to regular Olympic Taekwondo. It was similar, but different. So myself, I was typically training with Danny Kim back then a lot. And so we picked up our pace and we start working it a lot different. So our endurance would last better for that format and so forth. But it was a great experience. I wish Taekwondo was to look quite a bit more like that today, but it doesn't. It's quite a bit different.
Well, I hope people after this, listening to this podcast or watching this video, will go out there and look at those links, and we're going to certainly post them, the ones that I find on the different feeds so they can find them. One final thing I want to share with people is, I reached out to you for a while ago about your program, and we're finally getting ready to launch it, and we're going to be inviting you in to do a seminar and work with our people, both remotely and hopefully in person. Can you tell us a little bit more if you've continued to develop your Eskrima program, and if so, are you going around and teaching it and sharing it? And how many of those people are Taekwondo people?
Well, that's a great question because that's what I'm trying to push nowadays. Like not just the Eskrima, but I push Eskrima, BJJ, self-defense. They're the three things I push. And why do I push those three? It's because I pretty much exclusively or primarily push it to Taekwondo practitioners. I see the need in Taekwondo facilities a lot of times because Taekwondo is either very sport specific and self-defense doesn't exist. Okay. And also a lot of them that are successful, they understand the concept of systems of how to keep people motivated. And if you want to have longevity with your students, Taekwondo can get monotonous. We love it to death, but we always are trying to find 100 different ways to do the same thing. But if you can sometimes give them a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So if you have a black belt club, type of thing, and now they're able to do some Filipino martial arts, or they're able to do self-defense, or they're able to do this or that. Now it keeps them engaged. It keeps them motivated, and it actually keeps them that much more loving Taekwondo because they enjoy their Taekwondo, get to see more of what their Taekwondo is actually very good at. But at the same time, keep an open mind that, hey, I can do this, I can do that, type of thing. Every once in a while, you might get someone that might like the other martial art more, but they're still your student. They're still engaged at your school, So, and then every once in a while, someone might want to add this or that. But for the most part, they're still loving their Taekwondo and they're able to supplement with some other tools. And with the self-defense side of things, it's just like that really helps as well because a lot of schools are not offering self-defense. So now it gives them. So when I offer something, I don't say this is how you have to do it. Take what you want to take, use it how you want to use it. I just give it to you this way and then you use it how you choose, right? If they want to get certified, then they just have to bring me in for seminars. That way we can continue knowledge, education, right? With the Filipino side, I find that two main systems are the two most popular, Filipino martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're the two most common, for people wanting to engage. If they haven't already engaged in one of them already, they're looking to want to learn. And then in particular, the style of Filipino martial arts that I teach, it's very, very, very easy for Taekwondo folks to pick up. It's very, the way we teach it initially is kind of like similar to how Taekwondo people learn. It's kind of hard to explain, but they can pick it up a lot easier than some other Filipino martial arts. There's hundreds of Filipino martial arts and they're all great systems, but some of them kind of resonate better depending on how they're taught to different people. So, and I just find that Taekwondo people kind of resonate a little bit more with this one and it works a lot. It works very, very well with them. So, and then I do the online format. So the online aspect of it, which I really enjoy, I got into filming stuff during COVID. COVID was what prompted me to get into filming and start doing instructionals and all that kind of stuff. And actually it was a conversation with you prior to COVID. I think it was prior to COVID that prompted something with me. And you were mentioning something before to me about filming. I was like, that's interesting. And at the time I didn't have an interest. And then during COVID, I didn't have an option. I was like, wait a minute, you know what? I'm just going to invest some money in filming equipment and learn I took some classes online, and then I started doing a whole bunch of stuff. So I have instructionals on Filipino martial arts to supplement what people actually learn. So I can do a seminar, but now they can learn stuff online as well. So that way, when I see them, they already have the information. We're just complementing it with that additional hand to hand or person to person interaction. Same thing with the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I do the same thing for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu where they learn online and they use it how they want. Some people might put it in their self defense. Some people might put it in their black belt program. And some people might do a full fledged Brazilian Jiu Jitsu program. That's up to them. They decide what they want. But that's the beauty of it, and that's one of my huge passions. So one of my huge passions is letting people see what else is out there. Okay. Taekwondo is beautiful. Taekwondo is great, especially the version of Taekwondo that you teach and I teach. And it's great. Okay. But, sometimes to have, especially for your students, to get them to see something more than just, kicking and punching is also great. That's what, every time I go to, like, for instance, to Seattle to teach seminars, there's a dojo out there in Monroe, Washington that I teach at, and they're students of mine. Okay. And they're all fifth dans. Trinity's one of them and so forth. But when I go there, I never teach Taekwondo. I never teach Taekwondo. I've been doing Taekwondo 50 years. I'm an eighth dan. I don't teach Taekwondo. I teach Filipino martial arts, self-defense, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Why? Because I want them to have an open mind. I want them to be a free thinker. I want them to be a critical thinker. I want them to be jazz musicians without playing jazz. So it's my way of trying to nudge a little bit, without forcing anything on anyone, but get them to see more that's out there. And then that way they can open their horizons. And if anything, it maintains their passion and their drive for Taekwondo. Because I do believe it does that. Because that little bit of these other martial arts, even if they don't pursue it wholeheartedly, that's fine. Because one, they've been exposed. Okay, so they know there's something else out there that can make them better with their hand-eye coordination. They know something that's good for going to the ground or for throws for judo or whatever. But at the same time, you know what? I did this for 3 months, okay, during our black belt cycle or whatever, black belt club cycle. But now it's time to get back to my kicks. You know what? I've been missing my kicks. You know what? I want to do that patachuggy. I want to do that power roundhouse kick. I want to be able to do that stuff, and it makes people have and maintain that passion for Taekwondo at the same time. So teaching my Filipino martial arts, doing my online instructionals, it's great for me because it helps me to travel, see my friends, do seminars, educate and share with people. But I believe that the outcome of that sharing will help them either learn a new skill set or at least open their mind to that skill set and maintain or even broaden their passion for Taekwondo.
We need more individuals in the sport. Whenever we invite somebody to the Masters Alliance to speak, it's always somebody that I think is influential and has something to share that will help us grow as a martial artist, and more importantly, as a community. So we need more people like you with the mindset that you have and that have a complex understanding of what we do as martial artists. And then one of the most beautiful things you said was the idea that Taekwondo is like jazz, because it is. You learn the foundation, you learn the rudiments, you learn the ideas, and then it's up to you to create your new reality of what you think it is and what it should be. And as such, we're constantly adding to the canon of work, and we're changing the way the world sees us and we see ourselves, because it's only through that experimentation and creation that we continue to evolve. We're going to have you back. I'm going to ask you back for another podcast on what I would call the modern challenges of Taekwondo as a modern, I wouldn't call it a martial art, but I would call it a sport, and what I would say is the de-evolution of it. But that's a different conversation. So I want to extend that now because I think you have certainly the right amount of experience, and your forward way of thinking dovetails with what we're going to be doing with the WTMU and its education series with these instructors that have been here, certainly for as long as you and I have been, and then certainly for the younger ones that are coming up, because that's our legacy as we move forward. Today, though, I wanted to just take the time and besides honoring you and what you've done, I wanted to take the time to say thank you because I know you're busy. I see everything that you do, and I know you have a young child who's getting older, and I watch her journey. I know she was doing jujitsu for a little bit, but I really do appreciate your time, your energy, and the beauty of what you do. And you come to it with a humility and a way of looking at the world that is unique and welcoming. And so I can imagine why people gravitate towards you. And certainly we are looking forward to working with you and having you in for a seminar and launching the online program because we think that that is the future. Children these days learn in a variety of ways, but certainly one of the ways they learn is virtually. So as we explore those formats, I think you're one of the pioneers of that, and your business ideas really resonated with me. But before we sign off, I just wanted to know if there's anything else you'd like to add before we have you back for some of our other group panel discussions.
It's been a privilege and an honor for you to ask to have me here. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but you taught a seminar in North Carolina for a gentleman in Fayetteville. And I happened to be teaching, we co-taught. So you taught the sparring and I taught the poomsae at that seminar. And I remember you teaching your seminar. And I've actually taken another one when you were actually speaking at the Genoese tournament. Also, I was there attending that one. This is before I was in national rank. This is probably late 80s or early 90s. But when you taught at that seminar, you were teaching so many creative things, and you were teaching outside the box. You would show things that were structure, then you would say, "This is where I believe things should go," and then you were showing some things. I remember to this day exactly what you taught, and then it's such a beautiful thing to see, And we've known each other a long time, on and off, different experiences and so forth, but you were one of my idols coming up. So, and it's always been a great privilege to ever watch you. I always studied everyone's game back then and so forth. So, and you're from the Northeast area anyway, from, similar states. I graduated high school in New Jersey, actually, although I'm from Philly. So it's just been a great privilege and honor to be here with you, talk to you, and your depth of knowledge with so many things is so awesome. So it's always a great experience to have this kind of interaction with anyone, and especially with you.
Thank you so much, sir.